This podcast is being brought to you in partnership with Upland Outfitters. UPLND, Upland Outfitters. Use discount code AMAZEN, AMAAZEN. Remember, we stole all the A's, so Upland is UPLND, Upland Outfitters, and discount code AMAZEN, 10% off. Get you those relentless pants, man, and be relentless. They are top-notch. Made in America. Sourced in America. They are legit. I wear them all the time. Enjoy the show. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Amazing Outdoors Podcast. Today's episode, Sage Grouse. I'm going to play a little intro, explain a little bit who our guest is. It's a great episode. Enjoy.
My name is Sam Stien. I'm a firefighter paramedic for Jackson Hole, and I'm also a conservation ambassador for Wyoming Wildlife Federation. They would talk about these old quotes, and they'd say, sage grouse used to black out the sky. I mean, you can imagine it. We were out there today, and you see these sage grouse. I mean, imagine just having them everywhere, like just littered everywhere. Just these massive, giant, beautiful, delicious birds flying around. And it's so cool to be part of an organization that is on the forefront of that. And it's not just the habitat that we have, right? Wyoming is home to 83% of Wyoming is sagebrush. I mean, and that's what these birds live in. That's what these birds thrive in. That's what these birds need, is these big, giant tracts of like untamed land, essentially, this sagebrush. And the nice thing about Wyoming Wildlife Federation is it kind of plays this role between everybody, whether it's the governors, whether it's the state, whether it's NGOs, energy corporations. Everyone is kind of on the same page of these birds need to be here. These birds are more than just a landscape. These birds are an identity of Wyoming, and important. And to keep Wyoming, you need to keep these birds here.
Well, thanks everybody for tuning in to another episode of the Amazing Outdoors Podcast. I've got a very neat guest today. I don't know if he needs much of an introduction, but Sam Stien from the Wyoming Wildlife Federation is joining us today. So, Sam, can you kind of give the listeners a little bit of your background and what you do for a living, and kind of why sage grouse are so important to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I moved to Wyoming a little under 6 years ago. I'm originally in Chicago, nice Midwest boy. I moved out here for a job, and everything luckily panned out. Right now, I'm a full-time firefighter paramedic for Jackson Hole Fire, and I'm a part-time flight medic. So originally that kind of brought me out here. But while I was out here, I came out here with my bird dog, and I've always been bird hunting. And I had heard about this mysterious bird called a sage grouse, which was like giant. They called them sage hens, and I heard locals talk about them, and so I looked them up on the website and found out that it was like a weird 9-day season, and I was like, I gotta check these things out. And I went out. I'll never forget. I walked around all day, and I got into my first bird, just a lone just a lone grouse, kind of like probably 2 miles out of the road, and a bird jumped up, and it was this giant 7-pound monster bird. You
7
wouldn't believe
pounds,
it
huh?
out there. Yeah, they're huge, and this was to this day the biggest one I ever shot. I ended up getting it mounted. It's in the WWF office.
Was it a boomer or?
It wasn't a boomer, but it was just like a bigger male.
Okay.
And it wasn't until after I kind of realized the sin of shooting boomers. It's kind of like frowned upon. But again, it was like I had just moved here. I didn't really know anyone. I didn't really know.
Well, you have to explain that etiquette too, because it wouldn't be something that I would pick up being a Midwesterner going out there hunting.
Exactly. Yeah. So I made that mistake, but I ended up shooting this giant bird, and it was just kind of like this. You walk around this desert, and all of a sudden you realize that like there are hundreds of these beautiful, giant, small, turkey-sized birds out there that live in the hardiest conditions, and they survive and thrive. And it's just kind of like one of those things. The moment I thought, I was like, oh, this bird means so much to me. And now it's something that I never miss a sage grouse season. It's incredible. They're the most incredible bird.
Well, I've been kind of, I guess, I kind of knew who you were going back probably, I would say fall of last year, I think was when Wyoming Wildlife Federation came out with that worth protecting video. I think it was with you and your buddy Bobby. And I watched it again this morning, and I still get goosebumps, just the nostalgia aspect of these birds. And for me, I've got a really big soft spot in my heart for native bird species. Pheasants are great. Pheasants Forever is doing a great job. However, it's still a little bit of a struggle for me. I have a soft spot in my heart for the prairie chickens and bobwhite quail and sharp-tailed grouse and rough grouse, and I want to put sage grouse on my list this season. I want to knock it off. So, can you give us some of the history of these birds in Wyoming? And kind of, I know that there's, like a lot of these other birds, there's been a little bit of a boom and bust scenario going on. So could you kind of walk us through some of the history?
Yeah. So, it basically started in, like, I think it was 1805, is when they kind of first discovered them. It was Lewis and Clark. And I forgot exactly where it was, but Lewis had this famous quote where it was basically like, he called him like a heath grouse or a heath bird, and he quotes seeing like these birds in huge numbers. And then what happened past that is, through like through the Oregon Trail and everything, all these people started coming west. And as people started coming west, they started realizing there were these like insane amount of huge birds that lived in the middle of the stage. Now, what most people don't know is like the sagebrush is not like, you look at it and you're like, oh, I'm not missing anything. You're like, I'm looking over straight, flat plains of this like little kind of like, not prickly, but not the friendliest looking plant for hundreds of miles with nothing else there. No, not huge hills, not huge mountains. And it's, the sagebrush flat. It's like this high desert. And as people, were pushing their covered wagons and stuff, they noticed that there were these birds in like kind of huge numbers. And all of a sudden it was like this big thing where it was like people started talking about it, that the sagebrush used to black out the sky. And, so it was a well-known fact that these birds were all over the West, millions. As time went on and, the West was starting to be developed, a lot of those numbers started to go down. And it wasn't until, the last few years that, probably like the last 10 years, that people realized how many, that these birds were kind of in trouble. And a lot of that is discovered to be due to the habitat loss, not actually predators or anything. So it's one of those interesting things that the more research they did, the more they found out that these giant, beautiful grouse need vast tracts of untouched sage grouse land. The problem with Wyoming is that we have all these, we have these these energy companies and the stuff, and it's hard to keep those wild tracts of land when the Wyoming is trying to make, trying not to trash anybody when Wyoming is it's such a big oil and gas
Well, there's definitely a delicate balance. I mean, and that's kind of the mission of the Wyoming Wildlife Federation too, is to kind of bring all of those parties together. Correct?
Absolutely. And
yeah, because you've got oil and gas, you've got farmers that do large tract of cattle grazing. I'm assuming on these sage flats, and then you've got development and all this other stuff going on too. So, it much like a habitat loss in all these other bird species, it's a paramount issue. I know with sage grouse as well, and I guess we kind of jumped right into things too, and I wanted to give you an opportunity to give a little bit more of your background. But when you moved out from Chicago, obviously, I won't hold that against you either. Being a Wisconsin boy, we see way too many of those Illinois plates up there, and excuse me, as I was a kid, the fib was the going term for it when I was raised. But we'll leave it at that. But coming from Chicago, moving out west, and kind of shooting your first bird, and kind of finding this love for this animal and seeing some of the dire straits. I'm assuming that's kind of why you got involved with the Wyoming Wildlife Federation.
Yeah. So I remember I met this girl named Jeff Johnson, who is the policy coordinator for Wyoming Wildlife Federation. I met her in a coffee shop. She was wearing like a weird meat eater T-shirt. We started talking, and turns out she was a real big hunter. And I got to know her really well. This was 5 years ago when Wyoming Wildlife was still pretty small. It's grown on the last couple of years. But she was like, oh, here's the project, here's some of the stuff we do. And I had just started kind of getting into the conservation aspect of hunting, and I was like, oh, I know it's important, and I owe a lot of my involvement through her, because she's just such a passionate hunter, she's such a passionate conservationist, and she kind of clued me in that it was important to actually if you're going to take something, you're going to give something back. So I did a project with Wyoming Wildlife a number of years ago called Films of Feathered, where I got a bunch of bird enthusiasts together to watch a couple films, and we raised a bunch of money for sage grouse.
To kind of a play on the fly fishing film tours that you see out there.
So it's literally exactly what it is. And, it was supposed to travel, and we were supposed to repeat it again this year, but the problem was we had COVID, so it was right in the heat of it. We do it in the summer, which we just couldn't make it work this year. So we were going to do it online. I was swamped. I'm a full-time paramedic, so it's not ideal timing for me to work in the middle of a pandemic on my.
I wouldn't imagine so.
Yeah. So unfortunately, it kind of took a back seat, but it's something that we're trying to get out and going this next year. And
well, you let me know if you end up doing anything here in the Twin Cities or Upper Midwest. I'd definitely like to help you guys promote it and stuff, and be involved if I can.
Absolutely, that's huge, and it was a blast. But it was kind of that first step of being it's not terribly hard to give something back besides buying a tag and then removing a fence. So that aspect of conservation has always just been huge for me. Where it's if I'm going to take something, and I want to make sure that I'm giving something back.
Most definitely, it's something that I've come to the realization over the last few years of my life as well. When I was younger, I was just raised in a hunting family, and that's what we did. It was kind of second nature per se, and we just didn't think. I wasn't raised in a way that conservation was at the forefront of what we were doing, and it wasn't until I came out to the Twin Cities and I kind of started to having to kick the brush on my own and use public land and see some of these challenges that I started to come around full circle as well. And really the need to give something back.
Totally. And it hits you and you're kind of oh crap, am I behind the ball on this? And then you start giving back and you realize how easy it is. It's just kind of you start roping friends in left and right. And the next thing you know, you're oh, I get to do a cool film with Bobby Holik. It's so it pays off karmically, I think.
So before we jump too much into the sage grouse, I know you got some other cool things coming out. I wanted to give you an opportunity here at the beginning of the show to give a little plug to, I think, a cooking show you got coming up, right?
Yeah, so I'm very, very lucky in that I have no idea what I'm doing when it comes to filming, but I did a short stint in culinary school. So I love cooking. That's my passion. That's kind of like the reason I like hunting is I like the ability to go out and, kind of harvest your own game and turn that into something delicious on the table. And I had this idea a couple years ago, kind of like traveling. Uh, I don't know. I don't know if I call it a cooking show. I don't know what I'd call it, but it's the name of the project is Dirtbag Chefary, and it's just kind of about it's these small little adventures where I go out and I kind of talk to people and I do some hunts and I make some sort of dish from some sort of game and kind of talk to people about how easy it is to start cooking. The first episode is going to come out hopefully within this next month, and it was actually filmed at Jesse's house, my buddy Justin Jayden, and it's it's like a pheasant farm I think is what we made. But it's just this project where it's kind of an opportunity to like go out and show how easy it is to take, wild game and make it into something delicious.
Well,
and, you don't have to be highfalutin to do it.
If I can make one suggestion, if you end up coming up here to the Midwest this fall, you should do something on woodcock.
I would love to.
Woodcock, I think, has mudbirds, they have just this, I don't nostalgia about them that is not necessarily a good nostalgia for at least the taste of the birds. And I've tried to cook them myself a number of different ways, and I just haven't really found a way that I enjoy them. So I would love to hear your take on it.
I've never shot one and never cooked one, but I'd love to give it a whirl. I hear a lot of mixed things. They're like a blast to hunt, and some people love them and some people don't.
I would say that in our kind of grouse camp, they don't break the 50% mark on people enjoying them. One or two people usually take most of them home. I take a few home, and like I said, I've tried to prepare them in a couple different ways. I haven't had any luck. I'm not I did some cooking when I was in college and stuff, but I wouldn't call myself a culinary person.
Oh yeah, that's exactly what the show is designed at. It's like, oh, look at you don't have to be like fancy and all this to make this edible.
No, I think woodcock's a good challenge for you. I think it's a good. I just have not seen many stories around cooking woodcock, and like I said, I think it's got a bad rap.
Yeah, we'll have to give it a shot this year.
I think so, man. So, getting back into kind of the sage grouse stuff, I don't know. Is there anything else that you didn't kind of cover on your history and who you are that you feel is kind of important before we get into the sage grouse stuff?
No. I feel like I'm well covered.
All right, cool. I just wanted to make sure. I sometimes breeze through this stuff, so feel free to kind of stop me as the conversation rolls if I'm moving along too fast and there's an important topic that you think we should know. So, with that said, I kind of wanted to have you on because I really, really want to go out west this year, and I was given kind of the opportunity where I have a little bit more free time than I normally would have in September. So the idea of doing kind of a longer western hunt and kind of being able to give the dogs a break throughout the trip is definitely possible now. So it puts sage grouse at the top of kind of my list to start off the fall with, kind of sharp tails as well, but I think they open up a little earlier, so I might, get the itch to leave a little earlier than sage grouse season starts. But, it's summertime's long, man. September 1st rolls around. It's like, time for bird hunting. So,
absolutely. Yeah.
So I think, the sage grouse season, that's why I want to have you on. I wanted to kind of, you live out there, you know a lot about these birds. I don't. And I thought, the listeners could as well kind of tag along as I learn a little bit about the birds and kind of how to plan a hunt for this, because it's definitely a little different than what I would consider, a traditional hunting experience for me and my dogs. Yeah.
Well, it's definitely something that, like, I notice the more people that learn about it, the more they want to travel out here, the more they want to especially because right now the way it is, their numbers are greatly declining. They're not doing so hot. That being said, again, it's not because of hunting. It's not because of predation. It's because of habitat loss. That's, again, the biggest cause is loss in these birds is They just need vast, intact landscapes, with sagebrush and grassland. And they're sketchy birds. They're very, very hardy, but a telephone wire sketches them out. They don't like, that's it's I don't know if it's old folklore, but it's kind of like that. They really don't like stuff that's kind of way up there because they know that birds of prey and stuff can perch on that. But those oil rigs, stuff like that, it just never really works out for them.
Well, and so I've seen a few things too on some videos where I think maybe it was Colorado, Wyoming, or Montana, but one of the three states. There are groups, and I don't know if it's the Sage Grouse Initiative or your group, but they actually go out and put like little tags, reflector tags on fence lines.
On the fences.
Because these birds are prone to flying into fences.
Oh yeah, it's crazy because you got to remember it's a ranch, it's a big ranching state, so you'll have these giant feedlots out there, and these birds will just cruise right into them and smoke.
That's just a kind of a crazy concept, and
totally.
To me, I see fence posts, and I associate fence lines with bobwhite quail in Kansas. So to hear that kind of shift and that fence line actually is a huge hindrance, because I think a lot of people in the Midwest look at those fence rows and hedgerows as habitat, and it's just not working. It doesn't help the sage grouse at all.
Exactly. Yeah. No, they'll just smoke into it, and they get in big groups too. I've seen sage grouse in 20 plus in coveys of 20 to 30 plus birds. And you can imagine them just flying low because they hear something weird, and they all pop up and run. They all pop up and bust, and all of a sudden you're 10 feet from a fence, and these things fly like 50 miles an hour plus sometimes. They'll just smoke into these these low hanging fences. And, it could just decimate them.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So kind of the history, we kind of walked a little bit through it, and then we kind of took us back to a little bit of a little bit more personal stuff. But so the settlers came out, they saw all these birds, and I actually had interviewed Edgar Castillo, who I think did some writing for you guys regarding. I think the story was, "Hey, Mr. President, these birds need some help."
Yeah.
A great article, and Edgar's a really great guy, and he kind of inspired me to do a few things, and this was kind of part of that through some of his writing. And I was really talking to him. You started to mention, these flocks of hundreds of birds that would darken the sky, and I think Teddy Roosevelt was sitting somewhere, and he watched these birds come off of a plateau or a butte, and just hundreds of thousands of them was what he had kind of described. So there was this boom, and as these settlers moved out west, what happened over the last 100 years, with the mix of kind of the new shape and landscape with oil and gas and ranching and settlement, and the habitat loss. Where have these birds kind of been reduced to? What was their bigger range, and is there a smaller range on these birds now?
Yeah, so absolutely. So like you said, once people started moving west, and there was all that development and ranching and stuff. And again, no one source is to blame, but you used to have these giant. What they live in is sagebrush. That's why they're sagebrush. It's what they eat. That's what they nest in. That's what they hide in. That's their everything. And as you have the reduction of viable sage grouse habitat, you have the reduction of the land. So,
how does it? Because I think of about a cattle ranch per se, and
right,
at cattle ranch, go out and put up fence rows or fences so you keep the cattle in, and then they'll come in and graze everything down. Do those cattle pretty much graze that sage out completely?
No. So the cattle really. The nice thing about sage is that there are I'm sure I'm off on this a little bit, but there's really not that many species that actually can eat the sage. That's the weird thing about it's actually toxic to humans. There's a weird chemical in it, but the sage grouse can digest it, so they actually have a pretty decent diet as far as that goes. The problem is just the disturbance is that the cattle moving through the fences that are put up, like the people riding through to check on the cattle, all the development really of that is kind of what like drives them out, drives them all over the place. And that's like what really hinders them
Sure.
for the most part of it.
Does it have a lot to do with their lek sites being disturbed?
Yeah, a little bit of the lek sites, a little.
It's just disturbance in, like I think of prairie chickens. They live on kind of like a township. Prairie chickens and sharptails live on like a township kind of level,
Yeah.
in size. And I know that, when those leks get disturbed, that the success rate of that overall population tends to drop. And I'm assuming, just like all lekking species, sage grouse has that as well. But it sounds like even more so that township and that habitat getting disturbed just a little bit really hinders their population.
Yeah, it's really sad because they're very hardy birds at the same time. They're giant babies, so they can survive a Wyoming winter, which, if you haven't experienced one, it's rough. But
winds across Wyoming.
Exactly. But as soon as you put like a fence in there, all of a sudden they just start dive bombing into it. So it's like one of those weird things where, unfortunately, they're just not. They haven't really caught up yet to surviving the modern West.
Well, just from a single fence post being, able to be almost a higher predation rate than some, say hawks and stuff potentially. It takes a different level of management, a different way to look at things in order to kind of bring all those players together like your organization does, to come up with a viable solution going forward. It sounds like it's a major challenge.
It is. And it's really great because it was one of those things where everyone was like, oh, these birds are great. And then, about 10 years ago, actually, I think it was in 2010, everyone kind of got together and they were like, oh, wait a minute. We need to keep these birds around. So that's when, the Sage Grouse Initiative started. That was 2010. And that was basically like a partnership between, oil and gas, ranchers, conservation groups. It was kind of like one of those first things where it was like everybody, despite what they needed the land for, kind of came together to start like giving something back to the sage grouse. And that's when really a lot of the science really started coming out, and that's what's really helped kind of put numbers on these birds now.
Just curious, a random question. Through some of my shows, we've done a lot of stuff about Wisconsin sharp-tailed grouse, which is kind of a unique paradigm in the landscape challenges that they face to keep those birds here in Wisconsin. They've done some stuff with like GPS collars. Have you guys done anything with that?
I know Wyoming Wildlife not.
Maybe not you guys, but Wyoming in general. I mean, are they studying the birds on that kind of level?
I wish I knew the answer to that.
Yeah, it was random, so no worries. I
imagine they do though, because they know like the longest migration was like 150 miles. So I'm guessing that at some point they did do. There's the only way to know that. It's got to be by like a GPS collar.
Well, yeah. The old school telemetry stuff where they throw like a radio frequency collar on, and then they have a radio transmitter on the bird that pings, and then they had the old telemetry receiver, and they could pick it up with static. But that's a lot of work, and to be able to find that bird after 100 miles, I would think a GPS system would be able to give you a lot better data. And I know that the sage grouse has gotten a lot more light shined on them than say Wisconsin sharptail. So I would assume they probably done, but yeah, I'm just asking. I was curious if you knew, so no big deal. But that does kind of lead us into a little bit of an interesting dynamic with sage grouse, and especially too, I think it could play a huge dynamic when a guy comes out to hunt. These birds migrate, and a big cold snap or a snowstorm come through it, and it'll completely change the habitat that these birds key in on, at least from a location standpoint. Correct?
Right. Yes and no. Some migrate, some don't.
Really?
Yeah. So like there are, if the bird doesn't have to leave the area, they won't. It's almost like ducks, where it's like, oh, if I don't have to fly, if the water's not frozen, why would I leave?
Why?
So
What is it that drives them out? Is it like just freezing cover?
it's like you said, yeah, it's like loss of like access to stage. Anywhere with like really really high like snow accumulation will push them out. Anything with like a loss of diet, it's further they'll migrate. But some of them will be in those areas where they'll be fine and they won't need to migrate. So it's kind of interesting because more often than not they probably don't need to migrate. But that being said, it's like done well, so it's kind of interesting. I don't know what the percentage.
Yeah, and I know you're not a biologist either, so you're just a guy that loves sage grouse and works for an organization that is trying to take a big part in keeping these birds on the landscape. So I don't mean to throw some tough questions at you.
No. I feel like I should know the answer.
Yeah,
That's my bad.
No big deal. So these birds migrate. So I mean, weather coming through can definitely change their pattern from a hunting perspective. And it potentially could not, but it's a consideration a guy might need to take into one of the things you might want to consider coming out.
Especially they migrate from like August to September basically, and the season is typically sometime in late September, and late September in Wyoming is wild because you're like it could be snowing, it could be 90 degrees.
I know I've been out there in early September and even had 91 day and flurries the next day drove us out of the bighorns. So
yeah, exactly.
So what do these birds kind of do as a daily routine? Are they kind of similar to a lot of other birds where they'll kind of get off roost in the morning and go eat and then go loaf somewhere?
As far as that, it's kind of hard to say.
Yeah, again, you're not a biologist. I'm kind of curious what your just experience is hunting them.
I can give you typically in the morning and at night they will hit up water. Throughout the day, I've noticed that they, like midday when it's like really hot, they like to hang around the water. Doesn't necessarily mean they're hitting it up, but they'll hide in kind of the taller brush around the water. So in my simple smooth brain mind, they kind of get up in the morning, they'll eat their way to the water, they'll get some water, they'll kind of ease back out into the flat, and then they'll kind of sit there until later in the evening, and they'll go back because they nest and everything, and they just hide in the sagebrush, which is like shin high. So sagebrush actually, I think there's 4 or 5 different types, but you'll get some that are up to your hips almost. But when people come out here, they're like, oh, that's where they are. They're in thick cover. And that's not always the case. A lot of times I find sage grouse some like shin high stuff. And I don't know if that's because they can poke their head above it and they kind of can check stuff out. But I typically find them hanging out kind of in those areas during the day. And then they'll also kind of move the flatter areas with no sagebrush on it. And they'll kind of hang around there and then move back into the sagebrush. So it's hard to describe how to.
Sounds relatively unpredictable.
You can get in on certain behaviors they do for sure, but as far as like days, it's like hour to hour, I wouldn't know how to describe it.
So, planning a hunt. You guys have you guys have an abundance of public land. I mean, I think, what is it, 83% or something like that of Wyoming is public land?
83% of Wyoming is sagebrush.
Is sagebrush. So, okay.
47% of Wyoming is public land.
Okay. Still a huge staggering number.
Especially compared to Wisconsin or Illinois.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we got a lot of, Illinois, definitely not. Maybe the southern end of the state, they've got some national forests. But, I mean, up north in Wisconsin, there's a lot of public land or managed forest land. And northern Minnesota, we've got a substantial amount, too. But it's not, it's concentrated here. You in Wyoming, it's checkerboarded throughout the whole
Absolutely.
entire state.
Absolutely.
So a guy looks at the map and he goes, I don't know, kind of what I did when I moved up here. I was like, damn, there's just too many lakes. I don't know which one to pick.
Right.
So how do you narrow things down a little?
Well, I'm gonna give you a tip. Here's what I would do: 2 or 3 things. One, I would go online and you can literally Google sage grouse habitat, and you'll pull up a big map and it'll go over Colorado, Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, Nevada, and you'll see it'll literally show you where sage grouse current range are. I use the Sage Grouse Initiative website. It's great. It's got like a little map showing you exactly where they're at right now. The majority of sage grouse are in Wyoming. That being said, Wyoming's not the only state that you have to hunt them in. You can also hunt them in Colorado. I think, I know you can in Utah, maybe Idaho, probably.
No, I think you can in Montana. I just don't know if they have the season open this year. They usually have a pretty liberal season, though. Yeah, Montana and Wyoming
are pretty wild west, where they'll give you more days than anywhere else will. And again, that's not a bad thing. It's not, these birds aren't getting killed because of hunters. Very, very, very low percentage of bird loss.
It's habitat, and that's across the board with all species. If you just give them the habitat to survive, we're not going to do the damage on them, and neither will the predators and all the other conditions. They just have the ability to survive if they have the right habitat.
Yeah, before anyone blames you or me on it, it's not a hunter loss. It's a habitat loss, and the hunter's the one working on the anti-habitat loss. Really comes out of the wash.
Well, and our dollars that go to habitat work and go to fund the DNRs or whatever your fish and game is in the state. It's a good circle.
Absolutely.
We definitely do our part with some of the dollars that are spent on hunting out in that state. However, it's we're still taking something from the land. We had that discussion earlier, so
yeah.
So, anyways,
once you get, I went off on a tangent. So once you kind of get like a feel for what areas of the state you want to go to, the nice thing that I always do, especially with Wyoming, and this is definitely going to get me in trouble, is Wyoming has the nicest game wardens. Like I've hunted in 6 or 7 different states now, and I started hunting in Wisconsin, and nothing against Wisconsin game wardens. I'm sure some are nice, but they're always just a little bit pissed off, probably because they have to deal with some real assholes. But the Wyoming game wardens are just deceptively nice all the time. So before I moved here, I actually called one of them. I was like, "Hey man, I'm sorry to bother you. I know it's really your job." But I was like, "Here's kind of what I'm looking for." And he was straight up like, "Oh yeah, man, like that's around here." He's like, "I'm not, they didn't give me any direct points, but he really helped me out as to where to actually look, in what areas. If you look on the Wyoming Game and Fish website, they will give you different ranges and areas, and there's really only 2 areas in the state you can hunt.
Yeah, I think I looked at like 1 and 4 are the 2 that are open.
Yeah, and you can very easily figure that out from there. And you just kind of remember their range, right? Which is these like giant sagebrush flats. So you can even get on Google Earth and look on that. But the biggest thing I would say is kind of tapping into some local information as far as that goes. There's a lot of nice ranches and stuff like that. And this is like not the greatest tip, but there are people who guide and they'll tell you where they guide. And that's 50% public land, so they're probably guiding on public land. So it's like if you put in like a day's worth of information, it's very easy to find. I had somebody reach out last year who I would say I'm actually friends with now. And he was, "Hey man, like I don't want to blow you up, but this is kind of what I'm looking at. Am I near the mark?" And he was exactly on the mark, if not right off from some of my spots. And it was like all him, none of it was me. So it's easy to figure that stuff out. So like I said, I won't give anyone a direct point, but
No, I don't want you to hotspot anything, but it just really kind of, like I said, it's fast, it's wide open, and it seems a bit daunting to narrow things down. So you've kind of highlighted a couple tools that you have, and then I've done that as well when I travel too. Is I try to reach out even to the field biologists.
Those guys are great.
Yeah, they're great. They'll talk to you, and they work on either the habitat or with the birds almost every day. So they know, actually, I think a little bit more than the wardens, but that's good to hear about that the wardens will give you a little bit of time of day to talk, because
absolutely.
I don't want to crap on any of the wardens in Wisconsin, but I've had some similar experiences. So we'll just leave it at that.
Totally. Yeah. And again, it's a totally like honorable profession. I really appreciate those guys.
Oh, I do too.
Not crap on it. Yeah.
And most of the time that, the encounter wasn't great, it was probably due to me too. I was younger and didn't afford them with the same respect that I would now.
Yeah, exactly. I'm right there with you. The nice thing about Wyoming is, in order to be a game warden, you have to have a biology degree.
Oh, really?
And there's really not a lot of wardens in the state. So you'll like talk to a few in a certain area, and very quickly you'll get to them. Like I know my game warden in Jackson, and I know my game warden in Lander, and I see them at the bar. I buy them a drink. Like they're just regular people who love living in Wyoming, who understand they have a great job, and they're just out there to help people. As long as you're doing the right thing, they'll never knock you for it.
That's awesome. That gives I think a lot of people comfort as well, because some, it only takes one bad apple to ruin the bushel. And, with the way the word spreads today, one bad encounter on social media, it just creates a negative complex to the whole thing that I think is unneeded. So it's good to hear about the folks in Wyoming with that. So
reach out to anyone on the website, anyone, any of the local actual like offices are great if you think you're around the mark. And again, you can call in and be like, hey, Rock Springs, are there sage grouse around here? And sometimes they'll just tell you where they're at. It's interesting like that. It's very daunting, but also it's much easier than you think to figure out what area you want to start in. The hard part about finding sage grouse is actually on the ground with the dog.
So you have a tendency to tee these things up for me.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about your dog. You've got one of these dogs that I've interviewed. This is the second person that has had one of these dogs. You don't see too many of them out in the field. You've got a Weimaraner, right?
Yeah, unfortunately.
Did you say unfortunately?
Yeah, Ronnie Bain once told me that there are two people in the world: people who own Weimaraners and people who know better.
Well, I can't necessarily say I know that from experience, but I don't know Ron Bain personally. I've heard him talk enough on his podcast, but I don't know. The few I've met, they have great personalities, and I just have never hunted over one. So maybe you can enlighten me on why people wouldn't want one.
Well, no, I speak, most sarcastically.
I was assuming it was a little sarcastic. Sarcasm.
My dog is great. He's the man. He's a machine. You put him on the ground, he's a million miles an hour hunting. The problem is that he's so smart, and he's so like, I'm gonna hunt, that sometimes he forgets that we're a team and he doesn't have a gun or thumbs. So
I get that out of my short hairs every now and again, though, too.
It's like it's exactly like a short hair, but just like a little less controlled than I've noticed. And maybe that's me, but I've talked to a couple people who have that experience with Weimaraners where they're just like, yeah, they're great, but every once in a while they're just like, you know what? I know what I'm doing. I don't need you.
My oldest short hair is, if you could describe it to a T, that's how she is.
Yeah, exactly. They're just messier short hairs. My dog's nickname is Red Boy. It's really Bandit, but I don't know. You heard his name is Berkey. His name is Red Boy because it was once at my buddy Chet's house, and we left the dog for like an hour. We've been quail hunting all day. And he was like, oh, the dog's fine. I'm like, dude, the dog's cool. We find outside. and we had like just had to go to the store like an hour earlier. His wife was like, "Hey, we need bread for like your son's lunch." So we go to the store and we get that thing of bread. We leave it on the counter. He kennels his dog. I leave my dog out. I'm like, yeah, no, be fine. And come back, and the entire loaf of bread is gone. And ever since that moment, he just has this like addiction to bread, where you like leave him out and he'll find something of like bread substance and eat it. He stayed at my girlfriend's house and eaten like a loaf of French bread. He stayed in my kitchen and like found it on top of a microwave on top of the counter. He's very, very smart to the point now. He's just like mischievous outside of hunting season.
So I my other short hair is, the one that kind of has her, when we're out in the field, there'll be moments where she's like, I can do this by myself,
Yeah.
But my other one, she knows the partnership, and she's come along really, really good in that aspect. But around the house, if she doesn't have a mission for the day, man, she's
all right to your house.
Yeah, she's a lot like that, but she likes butter. It's not bread. And I mean, she will find a way to get the butter off the counter if you leave it there.
Oh my God, that's weird. My dog ate butter probably 3 days ago. I came home and there was like the butter dish was just scattered on the floor and he was hiding, and I'm like, oh, for sure. And again, like a whole stick of butter, but like bag of Fritos didn't touch him. Like it was like just butter. I'm like, dude, what is wrong with you?
Oh yeah, they're interesting, man. I growing up, I actually grew up with Irish Wolfhound. I don't know if you're familiar with the breed.
Oh yeah,
huge dog, right? I mean, like
massive.
Yeah, they literally can get to the back of the counter without leaving their forepaws. And I remember one time my mom had left the turkey out she literally pulled it out from the oven, and I forget what happened. She went to the other room real quick, and it was on the floor, and the dog was just going after it. And I'm going,
oh no.
Well, I'm just thankful my dogs haven't done any of that yet. And I mean, it was on Thanksgiving, I think, too. Oh, yeah, I'll deal with the butter and a few other things that, the dogs occasionally will go for.
Yeah.
As long as you're not eating my $30, 4-hour, 5-hour, 8-hour turkey.
Yeah, on Thanksgiving. I taught my dog to get beers from the fridge when he was like a year old.
Come on.
It's actually super easy to teach, but the problem was teach him to open the fridge or put a towel on the door, and I'd have him pull the towel, and then I put peanut butter at the bottom of the drawer so he could lick it up. So he was like, "Oh, I want to go in the fridge." And then
sure.
He'd retrieve the beer. Well, the problem with that is that, one, I'm not a dog trainer, so I didn't realize. He was like, "Oh, there's peanut butter in the fridge." So I would leave the towel on the door and go to bed, and I'd wake up, and he would just go grocery shopping all day, to the point where he's probably still got like half a rotisserie chicken rolling around inside of him.
Oh man!
I had to unteach him how to open the fridge, which is the worst, because it was like every time he went to the fridge, I'd have to be like, "No," and he was like, "I don't understand what I'm doing wrong."
Oh man, I we'll leave it at that, man. That's too funny. I have a lot of questions related to that, but we'll have to do that on another podcast.
Yeah, he's a mischief boy for sure.
So when we're out, back to the hunting, we go all day about dog stories, man.
Oh, absolutely.
So when you put your ground, you've kind of narrowed things down. You're gonna hunt this tract of land, and you pull your dog out of the box, put him on the ground. Do you guys look for any like topographical considerations? Like, do the birds like seem to be in washes sometimes, or is it just randomness, or are you kind of picking it apart from looking at the landscape when you get your boots on the ground?
So you'll get out there, you pick your spot, you have a reasonable idea that there's sage grouse out there. What I'll do is I'll locate some sort of water. And again, this can be miles. You can be like 4 or 5 miles from like a small, like little puddle that just kind of sticks around until late fall. And what I'll do is I'll actually get on the hill. And, you'll have these like rolling flat hills, and get on the highest hill you can see and look out. And you'll notice that the sagebrush is all over, it's all around. But the biggest thing that I notice is you'll see these little patches of bare ground. And I don't know what it is, but for some reason I always find them around those giant, like kind of like just dirt clearing. And
sure.
in my smooth brain, what I think is, I think they kind of wander around that stuff, and they maybe can see predators and stuff easier because they don't have the sagebrush. And I think they kind of start to migrate into the sage as stuff gets near. So I always shoot my sage grouse like outside of water in little dirt path clearings, or kind of around that shin high sagebrush. So I'll generally just do like a big loop around a source of water and just keep walking bigger and bigger and bigger circles until you hit that kind of like 4-mile mark. And I've done it where I've walked all day, not seen a single bird, done 8 miles, and then 5 feet from the car, had them jump up and shot them. If it's super windy, now I'm talking like Wyoming windy, where it's like almost blowing you over, they will cover. They'll cover not in like high sagebrush, but under like kind of bluff and stuff like that, or like the leeward side of a hill.
Yeah, makes sense.
So it's easier when it's like that, but it's not always like that. And it's hard to determine like the exact miles per hour to where the point is like, yeah, I'm out. Let's go hide.
Sure. So we've talked a little bit about water and being a key factor in at least what you're considering when looking at the landscape. Now you just said kind of 4 miles and 8 miles. I mean, how do you prepare you live out there, so I'm assuming you kind of run your dog quite a bit. And
yeah,
do you do any preseason conditioning or anything like that, or would you recommend any Flatlanders do anything like that for their dogs?
Yeah, the benefits I have is I live at a mile elevation. I live above mile elevation, so I'm very acclimated. But I guide sage grouse, and I can tell you I've had clients come out and they are Flatlanders, and they're a little bigger, and they are very quickly wiped out even walking on flat stuff, because it is you will be like I said, there are days you walk 500 feet from the car and you find sage grouse and you're done for the day. There are a lot of days you walk 8 miles and you will finally maybe find one bird. So it's kind of hard to pinpoint the amount you need to walk, but it's definitely something that you need to be reasonably aerobically fit for, or anaerobically fit for, because it is, you are going to be hunting past a mile elevation, in that high desert.
Well, and then too,
the dog,
you got, like you said, it could be 90 and it could be cold. So you've got the environmental conditions too that can impact whether or not, how long you last.
Yeah. And my dog, he's not the biggest runner, but he's an 80-pound Weimaraner. He's a big old boy, but he'll do, easily between 10 and 20 miles. But, he lives here. He's short coat. He's the ultimate sage grouse machine. He has these long legs. He runs over the sage grouse, or over like the sagebrush very easily. I got very lucky in that. If you have like a bigger short hair, or like a bigger Weimaraner, or like a setter, really anything with like long legs where they're not weaving around the sagebrush, it's certainly easier for them.
Sure.
But if your dog can like reasonably put in like I said, 10 to 20 mile days, a couple days in a row, that dog is good. Is pretty fit for it. And the nice thing is, it's not the worst terrain. Like, you'll get a little bit of rocks and like some gravel and some dirt, but it's not like major cactus. It's not like Arizona where you're just like constantly picking stuff out of your dog.
Sure. So how much water do you carry around on a day like that? I
carry as much as I can.
Yeah, I kind of figured as much.
Yeah, he's a blue line, so he gets pretty hot and he runs. Sage grouse is like his favorite. He doesn't need to talk to tell me that, but he'll just start moving when he gets out there. So I'll carry. I have like a Camelback. I'll do 3 liters, and then I'll carry another liter. I try and carry at least a gallon, because he'll just run, especially on those sunny days, and he'll just soak up water. So there's like natural water out there, but it's usually like the water that ranchers, kind of like let accumulate for the cattle or whatever stuff's out there. I wouldn't feel comfortable letting him drink kind of some of the backwater eddy crap that's in there.
Yeah, some of that stuff's pretty stagnant.
Exactly. So definitely carry like as much water as you can when you're out there.
Yeah, which, I mean, you carrying a gallon of water, that's a significant amount more weight than most guys carry in their bird vest. So, yeah, I can see where, throwing a little, throwing a little, backpack on with 10 pounds of weight in it and going for a few hikes before you go out there, it's probably a good idea.
Yeah, definitely. It's just one of those things that you're like, oh, I'm bird hunting. I'm not that much energy, but then all of a sudden, 10 miles in, like, I'm pretty fucking tired. But it's better to be fit than not fit. I've seen quite a few people come out here, and they, they're like, oh, I'm prepared very quickly. Yeah, you and the dog are both like, exhausted.
Yeah, I have a feeling, unless I really get a lot of time in August that I don't know that I'm going to get, I have a feeling it's going to be a little more painful than probably would be for you. But I'm a young guy, so
exactly.
I can carry a 40-pound pack in the mountains for 9 days in a row, so I think I can handle sage grouse.
No, it's not bad.
You throw chucker at me, it might be a whole different thing, but
yeah, it's when you start shooting birds that it becomes a problem. You're like, oh, crap! You're like, I have to carry 20 pounds back to the car with me.
Plus 9 pounds of water. Like two 7-pound birds and 9 pounds of water. You'll be wanting to water your dog quick.
Yeah, it ends up pretty quick.
Oh yeah. So, I know a lot. Like my really good bird hunting buddy that I go to Kansas with. I've tried to kind of. He's got a couple of young kids now that it's kind of more limiting for him. But even in the past, when we talked about making some of these out west hunts, he was always concerned about snakes. Personally, I'm not too terribly concerned, but I don't really know much about any of these snakes that might exist out in the sage grouse or sage flats, I should say.
I have a great story about this. So when I first moved here, I hunt to Wisconsin and Wyoming every year, twice a year, with these same two guys. And we all started hunting in Wisconsin together. They're good buddies. And one of them's a little bigger. His name's Sean, one of my best friends. And the other one's like my size, a little smaller. Tyler. And me and Tyler are just constantly badgering Sean. And so Sean's like, hey, do I need to worry about snakes? And I had personally asked that because that was my fear. I heard from the game where basically like, yes, there can be rattlesnakes out in that area. I personally, in my 5 years of hunting out here, have never ran into them out there. I've ran into them chucker hunting, which is like similar territory, but never any active one.
Yeah, it's more rocky too, right? And I mean, I'm assuming much like in the Dakotas, like the prairie rattlers, they hang out near those rock outcrops. Is kind of what I've found.
Yeah, and if you're like running into snakes more than what, actually, I take it back. I have a buddy who ran into one last year, but they were again by that like chucker grouse spot. Because a lot of the areas will overflow onto each other. Certainly you could see them, but it's not going to be like Arizona or Texas where you need to bring snake traps. But, knowing that, we told our buddy Sean, like, yeah, dude, get like the biggest snake traps you can. They're all over up there. And, it's like 90 degrees, like stepping over sage brush all day. And so this guy's wearing these like thick leather snake traps for like 2 days. He's like, why are you guys wearing them? I was like, oh, dude, there's no snakes out here. And he was like, are you fucking kidding me? So it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, keep an eye out for them, but it's not the point where you need to wear snake traps. You shouldn't really see them. There should be a little bit more. You should be fairly safe.
So, let's just say the 9 out of, or the 1% of time happens and you actually encounter something. Do vets out there kind of, do they carry that kind of stuff? I mean, to help a dog out?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I assume so.
You can get a vaccine too. It's not expensive.
Really?
I'm not sure how long it takes to work, but it's 50. Yeah, my dog gets it every, whatever it is, 1 or 2 years, like $50. But they can get their rattlesnake vaccine.
I might have to look into that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not bad. It's like it can certainly be dangerous to your dog if it's like you're super far away and the dog's really working and it gets a nasty bite from a young one. But like I said, I've really never can happen. The guy, the company I got for, he had one of his dogs bit last year, and the dog had the vaccine and just puffed up really bad. And then you still got to go to the vet. And I think they give him like another course of the vaccine and maybe antibiotics. But the dog, dog made a full recovery. But for a day there, he looked like a stiffy puffed marshmallow dog. Yeah, it's like.
So I one of the things that I do in preparation for trips is I kind of call around to at least kind of have an idea. I don't know. I use Onyx, not sponsored by them, but on a big trip like that, that's a great tool or whatever GPS. But I try to keep all my information in one area, and I always try to call ahead to just make sure that vets could service me while I'm out in the area if I have a problem.
Absolutely, and I would suggest that.
So, dude, I mean, you mentioned that the grounds and there's not a lot of cactus, that you're picking stuff out like desert Southwest. Do you see guys that come out from Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin? Do you see they put boots on their dogs at all?
I've seen some of them, and I've had to do it where, like I said, I hunt my dog 4 or 5 days a week during like prime hunting season because I have so much time off. So I'll get it to the point where I'll be checker hunting one day, I'll be grouse hunting the next day, and rock grouse or blue grouse or whatever, and he'll get like a little tear up on his paw. So I'll have to wrap one, and I'll still hunt him. But for the most part, if your dog has like healthy pads, it's really not a big worry. There are these very small, I don't know the name of them. There's these very small cactuses that are about probably 2 inches, at their height, and you'll see some of those out there, but it's pretty manageable, to be honest, as long as your dog has like decent pads. And I don't know, maybe my dog isn't super pad, but
well, yeah, and it's really too. I mean, if you have your dog in the house all year and let him out on September 15th, the pads aren't going to be conditioned. It's just kind of, anybody who hunts their dogs quite a bit understands a little bit of this. I mean, I actually I got an e-bike, and I take them down to this gravel road that's gated off, and it's 2 miles long, and I run them once a day down there, 4 miles down and back, and on gravel, and that's just solely so they can condition, but that it's really for their pads.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's like exactly what you need. Yeah.
So, kind of talked about the habitat and some of the hunting conditions. I know from my experience in Wyoming, it's one of the only places in the country where I see a lot signs for 80 miles, no service or next service.
Yeah.
So thinking about this, I kind of have in my head that it's probably, and again, this is kind of personal thing. I'm an outdoorsman. I don't mind spending time in a tent without a shower. Some people, they can't live without a shower and they need a nice bed to sleep in. What's advantages or pros and cons for, looking at maybe kind of roughing it? And I'm assuming dispersed camping out there is pretty much like all over the West, and versus like finding a nice hotel. I mean, there's definitely some trade-offs there.
Yeah. So the interesting thing is and this is something I struggle with because I came from Illinois, Wisconsin hunting and camping, where it's you make a reservation at the campsite and then you show up and there's a picnic bench and it's which again, there's really no federal land that had ever been to before Wyoming. The thing about federal land that all the Midwesterners should understand, and I didn't understand, is that federal land is the greatest invention of all time. It is BLM, U.S. Forest Service, unless it's marked or unless it's a certain distance within water, you can camp on it. The nice thing about Wyoming, 50% public land, you can find a dirt road that kind of leads to the middle of nowhere that's probably near Sage Grouse that you can literally camp on next to your car, in your car. There's always fire restrictions in the fall. That's the fire season. So check up on the BLM website or the U.S. Forest Service website, and they'll have it local to the area that you're in.
Yeah, it's a bad deal sometimes. Elk camp last year, I had to bring out my garage heater because we couldn't have a fire in our wall tent, and yeah, so we were burning propane. And it wasn't, I mean, there was just nothing we can do. The area that we had our tags for, it was under severe drought, and the whole state was burning at that time. And this was the only area that wasn't. So, a whole bunch of other challenges. I mean, I hunt way too many hunters, and what are you going to do? It's just kind of the way that the cards played last year. But so dispersed camping, I'm familiar with it. I've gone out west enough that the last time I went out and we tried to do like national forest campgrounds, I said enough with it. I'm buying my own table. I'm buying my own stuff, so I can just pull over in some of these beautiful spots that people have camped in. Some of these actually will have a rock fire pit that people have made in the past. They don't they don't want you to do new ones, but if you can be lucky enough to find one of those spots, you got everything you really need if you're self-sufficient.
Totally. I mean, I'm young like you, and again, I don't Midwest. I did not understand it until I was like living here for 2 years, but it is just so insanely like freedom giving to go out there and to be able to camp wherever you want and not have to do like the designated site. So like, I don't want people to feel like they have to get a hotel or they have to, like make everything planned. You can drive out there with an Onyx membership and figure out where to sleep.
That's what I was hoping to hear, because that's what I want to do. I mean, and I kind of having traveled out west and know some of this stuff, especially through like elk hunting. I mean, it's just like you drive down a forest road and it's like there's a dispersed campsite. There's a dispersed campsite, and just if there's not a lot of people, I mean, it's pretty easy to find a place to sleep.
Exactly, and it's just really, it's just really beautiful. It's a beautiful country that you would never value unless you've been there. You'd be like, well, this is a great desert with a bunch of sage grouse and nothing else in it. And then all of a sudden you start seeing the antelope, you start seeing mule deer and coyotes and sage grouse, and you're just like, whoa, holy crap, like what a valuable experience to be able to camp out here that I didn't know before. So that's great. But also, if you are feeling like staying somewhere, if you pick a local spot, there's plenty of Airbnbs, there's plenty of hotels, there's like usually like fun little like west cabins and stuff like that. It's a well covered range for everybody.
That's good to hear, because I'm trying to spend a lot more time than I would normally, maybe a couple weeks out there, and I can go a long period without a shower, but it'd be nice to stay in a bed and take a shower a couple times over that couple weeks.
Yeah, so. You could just stay at the house. Don't worry. Everybody else is through, but you're fine.
Well, I appreciate that. So, with that, if you do stay in a hotel or, an Airbnb or something, I'm assuming typically you have quite a bit of driving that windshield time that you do. And kind of the advantage of camping is it kind of puts you right in some of the locations that you might want to hunt.
Yeah, there are. I don't know. Wyoming's hard. Wyoming is like a short drive. Wyoming is like 2 hours. Like, oh, it's a quick trip. Just living in Wyoming, you don't like. Again, coming from the Midwest, I was like, you want me to drive 2 hours for groceries? Like, no. But then all of a sudden you move to Wyoming again. It's just like part of living in Wyoming. So I'm not a good reference for windshield time, but for me, it always feels like a quick trip or less than where you need to be.
Sure.
That makes sense.
It makes sense. And I'm probably not a really good reference either, because I come from a previous career where I drove 50 to 60,000 miles a year, and
exactly.
My buddies would be like, "Oh, you're going to drive all the way up there to hunt for the day?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's 2.5 hours, and if I leave early, I can get 8 hours of hunting in and still be home for dinner."
You're gonna fit in great here.
Yeah, I don't mind the windshield time. I mean, especially when think about driving around in Wyoming. I mean, I think I'd have a harder time staying on the road. You might be looking, rubbernecking all the time at stuff.
Yeah,
it's just a beautiful landscape.
It's great out here. It's really not a problem to stay somewhere in the drive. Again, I don't want to give out too much information, but after the show, I'll tell you how far I drive. Big town.
So, I guess kind of in wrapping things up a bit, is there anything specifically that's going on for this season? I know that like Zone 4 has like a 2 or 3 day hunt, and I think Zone 1 has a longer, is it maybe like 14-day hunt?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, unfortunately, that stuff won't be decided until June or July.
Is that when it all comes out?
Yeah, that's when the commission will get together and they'll kind of put out those dates and stuff. And again, like the thing that people get caught up on is just like the natural distrust of the game and fish, or like the scientists out there. And I can tell you, I've never met a bad biologist in Wyoming, like a guy who's not insanely passionate. So whatever the science is, I trust it. So when they say, "Oh, we can afford to have a 9-day season this year," it's like, yeah, that works. That works for me. I know there's research put in this, and when it's, "Oh, we can't do it this year. There's not enough birds, and we just don't want to mess with it." I trust that too, as far as that goes. But it's just I'm just rambling. Yeah, it'll be determined late June, July. I expect like anywhere from a 9-day to a 4-day season, or anywhere from a 4-day to a 14-day season.
Okay. If a guy comes out and say second day of sage grouse season, gets on him right away and gets his 2 birds, and he's got a whole day now. How close in relation are some of the sharptail habitat and chucker you mentioned some of the chucker habitats real close. What other kind of birds could a guy chase? You got duskies, you got blues, but I mean, are they close enough that a guy could go shift gears and still spend an afternoon doing something else?
Yeah,
that's awesome.
I can't give it. If you fly fish, you're gonna love it here. If you bird hunt, you're gonna love it here. If you're willing to drive, you're gonna love it here. But I've had days where I go for the triple grand slam is what I call it, where you get a limit of sage grouse, a limit of rough grouse, and then a limit of early season geese. And I've gotten close. The seasons don't always line up all the way. It was like 3 years ago I did it. Not geese, ducks.
Oh, sure.
But I've had it where the last day of sage grouse season, I was able to, and this is with my 2 buddies, we were able to get a limit of sage grouse, a limit of ducks, which is 6, and then get one rough grouse in the whole group, which is sad that we didn't, get more. But again, it's like that's, again, food for all of us before I get flamed for saying that. But Wyoming is a hidden gem for bird hunters. You won't be bored if you're here.
Well, and I love to fly fish too. So I mean, that's why I'm telling you, I'm trying to plan being out there for a little longer than I normally would. I just want the time to take a breath and not feel like, living in the corporate world, and I know a lot of guys feel this way. They spend 4 or 5 days that's their allotted time for the trip, and it's like they just got to pack it all in. And sometimes I don't know, I've done this where I'm driving home and it's just like it was great, but it went by so fast. And I find that if you get the chance to shift gears or take a break, smell the roses a little per se, the trip doesn't necessarily seem like it went by so fast. So I said, screw it. I'm taking the time and I'm going to make sure it doesn't feel like it went by so fast.
Yeah, no, totally. There's so many options out here. There's so many rivers. September's a great time to be here. You can, it's phenomenal.
So a couple questions here and we'll kind of wrap things up for today. So you mentioned you had a couple buddies here from Wisconsin, Illinois, Midwestern area. Other than telling them to get, snake chaps when they don't need them, what kind of expectations would you kind of set in preparation for your buddies coming out?
I would say definitely the fitness level. Be able to walk quite a few miles at elevation. Bring a lot of water. Make sure your vehicle is ready, because if it rains or snows, it's very easy to get stuck up in a muddy spot. You'll eventually be driving dirt roads. I've seen multiple people, even locals, just idiots, get stuck because they'll be driving along a dirt road and they won't pay attention, and it'll just drop out from under them because there's these giant little like runoffs that you won't see that are just the size of a tire. So I've seen quite a few people get stuck doing that.
Yeah, I've had a few run-ins in Kansas, and I like you say, it rains, and all that road that you drove all week long drives completely different.
Exactly. So yeah, it's like make sure your vehicle's up for the trip, make sure your body's up for the trip, and then also just make sure that you like. There's definitely a culture in Wyoming of it being the cowboy state. So just make sure you're just kind of aware of that when you come to visit. Where it's some people don't really like out of staters and some people love them. We have weird rules when it comes to like grazing. We have weird rules when it comes to public versus private land. But that being said, overall, everyone here is just really nice, and if you're just nice to the locals and you're just honest and straight up, it's the best state in the U.S.
I always kind of look at it as, some of these places you go, you got to extend your hand first. And if you extend your hand first in kindness and gratification and just being a good person, it comes back tenfold.
100%. I've had it where I've talked to people at a gas station. I was at a gas station with a bunch of buddies and Kevin Murphy and from Meat Eater, and I've gone on quite a few hunts with Kevin. I love him, and he had a bottle of whiskey he would pass around to people, and he passed it to a random person. I was like, Kevin, that guy's not in our group. And he was like, oh, well, it's whatever. It's Wyoming. And the guy was like, hey, thanks. Took a swig and was like, oh, dude, you guys are looking for this? Like, here's exactly where I would go. And like within 20 minutes, we were all done. It was like, just be friendly to people.
I can't say I passed around a bottle of whiskey at a gas station in Kansas, but I've definitely been friendly to people. And this last trip I was down there, just, talking to the lady at the counter nicely as I getting a cup of coffee and filling up the truck. And the guy behind me heard me, and he stopped me on the way out and he said, hey, good, let me check out here. I wanted to talk to you for a second. And I'm like, oh, okay. And walk outside, and he's like, yeah, he goes, I got a farm up the road. Are you looking for a place to bird hunt? Yeah.
100%.
And it just came out of, just taking 2 seconds to, be nice to the lady at the counter at the gas station in some town I've never been in before. It was first time in town. So, it's those kind of things I think that, a lot of people need to take into consideration when they travel and extend that nicety and it'll come back to you.
100%. That's all my best hunting that has ever happened was because of somebody else's niceness or somebody else's tips.
I agree. I mean, that's how I actually got into bird hunting. Was I had a buddy that I got a dog, and I didn't, I had some expectations and I was going to do some stuff, but he kind of took me under his wing and off we went. And it was because of his kindness, and he didn't know me from Adam other than, meeting on a fishing trip. So.
Yeah, exactly. It pays off for sure.
So being a traveling wing shooter and some of these things that we talked about earlier, taking things off the landscape, what can the traveling wing shooter do, taking a sage grouse this fall in Wyoming to give back to the sage grouse habitat for the future other than, buying a license?
Money. Give me. No.
It all comes down to money, man.
It all comes down to giving me money. No, so the biggest thing is unfortunately, if you don't live in the area, which again is fine, it's federal public land, it belongs to everybody. I firmly believe that, which is why I'm not going to discourage anyone from hunting here. And you're not able to do kind of those local projects like the fence removals. There's a lot of really good NGOs that make your dollar go so far. One of them being the Sage Grouse Initiative. They work with, they're kind of like a middleman for a bunch of groups. They work with Pheasants Forever. They work with some oil and gas companies. They work with Wyoming Wildlife Federation. They do all this great stuff. And unfortunately, it's an NGO. So that money, comes from donations and them just basically hanging their hat out there. And you can donate right on the website, which again, if you have the honor of listening to this podcast, you come out and you shoot a bird. the least you could do is toss $100 to this group that makes it so you can have the same experience next year. I got to plug my own group, Wyoming Wildlife Federation. They are hands down the most realistic, straightforward conservation group I've ever worked with. I've done DU, I've done all those other groups. They're all great, but Wyoming Wildlife just has the benefit of being a small group. I mean, it's less than 10 full-time employees. They're all a bunch of passionate hunters, passionate conservationists, biologists. I mean, they're all super smart groups, and unfortunately, the only way the lights stay on is through donation. And that's why I'm blessed to be an ambassador for them, because I'm out there just hustling so that way they can stay around. If you have an issue, you have a question, you reach out to WWF, and they'll either answer it in 24 hours or they'll put you in contact with someone who can.
Well, yeah, I can't speak enough for that, because I actually reached out to them on Instagram, I think on Thursday, and we chatted with it. I mean, and they were like, yeah, you got to talk to Sam. And so I had hit you up, and I mean, you were super responsive. But I mean, from the point I reached out to, us recording this podcast is less than a couple days. So that speaks to the amount of just availability that you guys have for issues, for people. You guys are going to get a little bit of money before I put any gas in my truck to head west.
Well, that's huge, and we appreciate it, especially during, September through December, because really nobody's in the office. So, no, I'm kidding. It's just that's huge, and there are so many good. Pheasants Forever is great donation source too, and just the awareness. And again, I don't blame people for not knowing or caring about the bird. And, the thing that connects me to the bird is being able to hunt them. And you have one wild experience in a place you've never been, and all of a sudden you're like, yeah, man, I'm in. I'm in every year. Here's $100. Like, here's 200. Like, whatever you feel is like your donation is it goes so far to us. It means so much to us.
Yeah, and I can't personally say enough about donating to some of these smaller groups. I become a lifetime member of the Wisconsin Sharp-tailed Grouse Society because I felt that my money went so much further with that group than it would have went with, say, Pheasants Forever. And nothing against those guys.
But, no, totally.
But yeah, I mean, same thing applies for your group. Your dollars are going, I think, probably more directly into habitat and awareness and to help the animals than all of the overhead that some of these larger groups have.
Yeah, we have to send Joy Bannon to the Sage Grouse Initiative meetings every year, and it's hard to pay her, because she is a full-time mom, so it's hard to get employees to the meetings they need to be to speak at the things they need to without helping them keep their lights on. Jess Johnson spent the entire February at Wyoming State Legislature fighting tooth and nail for conservation policies and stuff like that. And again, we can't just send her down there without paying her, because who's going to feed her 10 wiener dogs at home? So it's like, it's a really small group, and it's everything really helps us.
Well, I'll definitely include that information and a few other things that we've talked about here today in the show notes. Real quickly, the show again that you're producing was Dirtbag Culinary?
The Dirtbag Chefary.
Dirtbag Chefary, okay. And where can people find it?
I'm going to post it on my Instagram, which is just Sam and Bandit. I'm not real great at the YouTube. I should probably put it up on there. Wyoming Wildlife is going to help me release it too. So somewhere online between Sam and Bandit and Wyoming Wildlife Federation, you will find it.
I'll make sure to include your Instagram handle in the show notes too, so people can kind of keep an eye out for it.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Well, man, I'm looking forward to coming out this fall. I sure hope you can make it back up here, because I would love to put you on some good woodcock hunting.
Oh, 100%. We already have a duck trip planned. You should coordinate with us. It's on a nice little private farm owned by Sean, so we can go and fuck with him in person.
Should I bring a pair of snake chaps for him?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We like to put blanks in his gun.
Something tells me they have a blast hanging out with you guys.
Yeah, it's way too much fun sometimes.
So, other than coming back here and hunting out in Wyoming, you got any other big trips for the fall?
Every year I try and get out with Chet, my buddy who's in Idaho. Every year, me and Bobby, we get out to several places. I'm definitely 100% going back to Arizona. I went there this year, and that was incredible.
Who'd you hunt with down there?
With me, Bobby, Zach from CZ, Zach Hine.
Okay.
Awesome dude.
You guys take an outfitter out, or did you just go down and kick the choya?
No, we had Bobby used to do wing shooter, so he knows a bunch of people, and he doesn't do it anymore, but he knows a bunch of people. And we went with this guy, Brett Browning. Actually, I got to plug him. He's the nicest guide ever. The dude's a maniac. I mean, he'll walk like 30 miles and just keep going. And he put us on so many birds. And I forget the name of his guide company, but so we went just with like kind of a big group of friends, and it was just a blast. It was so much fun. I hope to be end of January and in February down in that part of the country. I'm a little over the Midwestern snow, and I would like to kind of start being a little bit more of a snowbird and extend my season with the dogs. Yeah, I'm telling you, it was like we went the last weekend in February, and I saw more quail than I've ever seen. It was so much fun.
Did you guys chase all three of them?
We did, I think, Gamble's quail.
Gamble's, okay.
But it was great because it was just like at night we were in the hot tub outside, and during the day we were just walking like 30 miles. So yeah, it was great.
Some people are like thinking, "Oh, this guy's sick," but it's not that hard to put on that many miles when you're chasing a dog. I mean, I'll put on 10 miles in the grouse woods.
Oh yeah, Bandit did his longest day ever. He did 26 miles, Jeez. And I was like, "Dude, you just did a marathon today." It's like,
you run a GPS collar on him at all?
I just upgraded to the GPS collar, and it was like, I was like, "Oh, I'm spending way too much money. I don't need this technology." And I bought it, and now I'm like, "Yeah, I'm never going back. Like, this Garmin is sweet."
Do you have the Alpha?
Yeah.
Yeah, I started running that last season too, and I kind of had a run in. We were looking for morels actually last spring, and all of a sudden I turn around and when I'm down to one dog, and the thought of coming home to Mama without a dog kind of entered my mind, and luckily we about 10 minutes we got her back, but I don't even other than hey, something electronic fails, and I don't even think about it anymore, and it's just so nice not to have to. Hey, is the dog? You see the dog over there, especially in the grouse woods, man. I mean, you can't see the dog 25 yards out sometimes, and it's just a quick look at the GPS. All right, it's over there, So, yeah, just for personal kind of comfort, it's been flipping awesome. And then I found the dog stats were unbelievable because I have a dog with really long legs and I have a dog with really short legs, but the dog with really short legs runs much faster than the dog with really long legs. And to see the stats, I mean, it explains some of the things I was wondering the season before. It's like, this little one, she's always getting gassed out. And it's like, well, yeah, one dog went 10 miles, you went 13, 14, well, it makes a little more sense.
Totally. Yeah. It's a game changer, especially in the grouse woods, like you said. All of a sudden, like, there's not that annoying beep and flush. It's like just a silent point, and then you're like, oh crap, just walk right over here, shoot the bird. My ratio of success went way up last year.
Mine too. At least I don't know. I've done the beeper collars. I've done the bell, and I know people say that it doesn't affect the grouse, but I had more birds hold for points than I've had in the last couple of years using those other devices. So I'm sold on it.
Yeah, I'm sold on it too, man. It's great. Hey, dumb question: are they waterproof?
Well, my dogs have gotten them submerged, the collars. I know that I've been soaked myself out in the woods with the remote. I'm assuming they're water resistant.
Oh God, I let a buddy borrow it last week, and all of a sudden I get a picture of my dog swimming, and I was like, oh no, that collar's like $300.
Yeah, the collar I think would be off. I wouldn't have too much concern about the collar itself, but the handheld, yeah, I wouldn't want to put that in the water.
Yeah, no, definitely not. Now I gotta Google it. It's gonna bother me.
I'm fairly certain that they've got a waterproof rating on the collar, and I'm sure that the remote's probably more marketed as water resistant.
Yeah.
Oh man, well, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. I guess in closing here, is there anything that you wanted to kind of wrap up with that we didn't cover?
No, but just thank you so much. It's been a blast, man. I can't wait to hunt you this year.
Yeah, no, I'm really super stoked. I told my wife that I'm going to be out in Wyoming a little longer than I thought, and that we kind of hooked up, and maybe you guys would come up north. And she goes, "Are you going to take me with you?"
Yeah.
I'm like, well, if you can get 3 weeks off of work, sure. And she goes, well, I can't do that. And I'm like, well, you can fly into Jackson or Cheyenne, one of the two, and come out and hang out for 4 days.
Yeah. Invite her out.
No, she's definitely going to. She does home care, so she works like 24-hour shifts, and she hasn't had a vacation since COVID hit, and we kind of finally got her schedule shifted so she can kind of take 4 or 5 days, and has some of the shifts covered. She runs a small business, so she's paying for it right now. But no, by September, man, she wants to go back to Wyoming. She loved. We used to spend a lot of time in the Bighorns, and I love fly fishing the Tongue River over there, and she's got some great memories, and she wants to go back.
It's gorgeous out here.
I'm just struggling whether or not I need to bring the dog trailer or my drift boat.
If you bring the dog trailer, we can you can take my boat.
Well, we can hash those details as it gets a little closer to the season.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. We'll make it happen.
Well, hey Sam, thank you so much for coming on, and again, looking forward to this fall. I think we're going to have some fun.
Can't wait. It's going to be great.
Thank you for listening to another episode of this podcast. I am so grateful for all you listeners, for the opportunity to bring you this content. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, you know the drill. Join your local conservation effort, like I always say. If you're going to take something from the landscape, be willing to put something back. And if that's your dollar or your work, make sure you get it done. God bless America.